The stair landing on the 5th floor smelled of dampness and old paint. Yeon A sat on the cold steps, holding 2-year-old Ji Hoon close to her chest. The boy sniffled, burying his face in her shoulder, his little legs dangling lifelessly, those very legs that had never learned to support his weight, that didn't straighten like other children's. "My son Woo is golden." Her mother-in-law's voice pierced through the door like a knife through paper. "And you, a poor teacher who gave birth to a cripple. Get out and don't disgrace our family." The door slammed with such a crash that Ji Hoon flinched and cried louder. Yeon A rocked him mechanically, staring at the peeling paint on the wall across from her. 2 bags with their belongings lay nearby, everything left from 3 years of marriage. Children's clothes, a few books, her old sweater. Sun Woo never came out. Her husband, who had promised to love her in sickness and in health, didn't even appear to say goodbye. He didn't defend them when his mother called their son. That word. Yeon A remembered 4 years ago, when Sun Woo had waited for her at school with a bouquet of roses. He was handsome, confident, working at a decent company. His mother had looked at her daughter-in-law with disdain, an ordinary literature teacher from the provinces, without connections, without money. But Sun Woo insisted. He wanted her. Everything changed when Ji Hoon was born. The delivery was difficult. The child was born with underdeveloped leg muscles. Doctors spoke of a genetic mutation, saying it was impossible to predict. But her mother-in-law didn't listen. She saw only one thing: spoiled blood, a failed daughter-in-law, the broken future of her only son. He could have married anyone. She screamed every night. The boss's daughter. That girl from a rich family. And he chose you. Sun Woo stayed silent. At first, he defended his wife, but with each passing month, his voice grew quieter, then disappeared altogether. He came home late, ate dinner in silence, avoided looking at his son. And 3 days ago, when Ji Hoon couldn't stand on his legs once again, Sun Woo just left the room. And didn't return that night. That morning, her mother-in-law entered their room with 2 empty bags. "Pack up," she said in an icy tone. "My son deserves better." Yeon A rose from the steps, lifting the bags with one hand, Ji Hoon with the other. The boy was very light for his age, but her arms trembled with exhaustion. She hadn't slept for 2 days, trying to find words that could change anything. But there were none. The elevator didn't work, as usual. Yeon A slowly descended, counting the steps. 132. She would remember that number forever. At the entrance, she stopped to catch her breath. Evening was falling. May was warm, but the wind cut to the bone. Yeon A took out her phone, old, with a cracked screen, and dialed the only number she could think of. "Mom?" Her voice trembled. "Can we come to you?" Her mother lived in a small town 3 hours from Seoul. She worked at a textile factory and rented a tiny room on the outskirts. When Yeon A married Sun Woo, her mother cried with happiness. Her daughter had settled down, found a worthy man. How wrong she was. "Of course, darling," her mother's voice was hoarse with fatigue. "Come. We'll find a place." Yeon A hailed a taxi. The driver glanced at the crying child but said nothing. She looked out the window at the streets of Seoul rushing past. Somewhere there, in one of the office buildings, sat Sun Woo. Working. Living his life. Without them. Ji Hoon fell asleep in her arms, sniffling in his sleep. Yeon A stroked his dark hair, just like his father's. The boy looked like Sun Woo, the same eyes, the same face. She wondered if her husband had noticed the resemblance. Or did he look at his son and see only broken legs? "Everything will be fine," she whispered, kissing the crown of Ji Hoon's head. "I promise you." She didn't know how she would keep that promise. She had no money, only a few thousand won in her wallet. No job, she had been fired from the school after giving birth when she took extended leave. No home. Nothing. Except for this little boy, sleeping in her arms, trusting, pressed against her heart. Her mother's room was tiny, 9 square meters, barely fitting a narrow bed, a small table, and a wardrobe. Yeon A and Ji Hoon slept on the floor on a thin mattress. Her mother left for the factory at 6 in the morning and returned at 9 in the evening, exhausted, her legs swollen. "I can't stay here, Mom," Yeon A said on the third day. "You can barely make ends meet as it is." "You're my daughter," her mother said with a tired smile, sinking onto a chair. "Where else could you go?" But Yeon A knew it couldn't go on like this. The next morning, she left Ji Hoon with a neighbor, an elderly woman who agreed to watch him for a symbolic fee, and went out to look for work. The town was small. There was only one school, the very one Yeon A had attended 12 years ago. She pushed open a familiar door, walked down the corridor, unchanged, and knocked on the principal's office. "Yeon A?" The elderly Mr. Ho raised his eyebrows. "My God, how long has it been? I heard you got married and moved to Seoul." "I've returned," she replied shortly, lowering her eyes. "Mr. Ho, do you have a vacancy for a literature teacher?" The principal paused, studying her. Yeon A knew how she looked, gaunt, in a worn blouse, with dark circles under her eyes. "Miss Lee retired last month," he said slowly. "We are looking for a replacement." "But, Yeon A, the salary here is small." "You know that." "I know," she exhaled. "It will be enough." "Then start Monday. Bring your documents." Yeon A ran out of the school, and for the first time in a week, a smile appeared on her face. Work. She had a job again. On Monday, she began teaching. The classes were small, 15 to 20 students. Teenagers looked at the new teacher with curiosity. Yeon A conducted lessons as she had 4 years ago in Seoul, passionately, with fire in her eyes, reciting poems by heart, making children think, feel, argue. "Literature isn't dead letters in a book," she said. "It's the living voices of those who wanted to say something to the world. And you can speak too. Right. Don't be afraid." After class, she ran to the neighbor, picked up Ji Hoon, and carried him home. The boy grew, but still couldn't walk. Yeon A began studying everything she could about his diagnosis. She read medical articles at night when Ji Hoon slept. She learned about therapeutic exercises, massages, special movements. Every morning at 5, she woke up and massaged her son. She kneaded his thin legs, bent and straightened his knees, massaged his feet. Ji Hoon winced, sometimes cried, it hurt. But Yeon A continued, whispering stories to distract him. Every evening, exercises. She held him under the arms, forcing him to support himself on his legs for a few seconds. Then placed him on the floor, teaching him to crawl, to push off. "You can do it," she whispered. "I know you can." A month passed. 2. 3. The salary was barely enough to live on. Yeon A saved every one, economized on everything. But she needed orthoses, special devices that would help Ji Hoon stand. They cost a fortune. One day, at the end of August, Principal Ho came to her after class. "I have a proposal," he said. "There are a few children with special needs at the school. One boy in a wheelchair, one girl with hearing difficulties. They study individually, but I think they lack social interaction. Could you organize a literature club for them? I'll pay extra." Yeon A froze. Children with disabilities. Like Ji Hoon. "Of course," she exhaled. "I'll do it." The literature club met for the first time in mid-September. Yeon A was more nervous than before her very first class. She arrived half an hour early, arranged chairs in a circle, placed paper and pens on the tables. 5 came. Min Jae, a 14-year-old boy in a wheelchair with cerebral palsy. So Yeon, a 12-year-old girl with hearing impairment, shy, avoiding eye contact. Yeon, a 15-year-old boy with Down syndrome, cheerful and open. Yeon A, a 13-year-old girl with weak vision, wearing thick glasses. And Ji Hoon, a 16-year-old boy who had suffered a stroke a year ago, with partial paralysis of his right hand. They sat with heads down, tense, expecting pity or condescension. "Hello," Yeon A sat down with them in the circle. "My name is Yeon A. I'm a literature teacher. And I want you to write." Min Jae snorted. "Why?" His voice was sharp. "So everyone can coo over how great we are, despite." He gestured at his wheelchair. "No," Yeon A replied calmly. "So you can say what you want to say. So your voice is heard. Each of you has a story inside. And it's important. Not because you are special, but because you are human." So Yeon lifted her head. Her eyes sparkled. "But I don't know how to write beautifully," she whispered. "I barely hear anything at all. And I see poorly," Yeon A added. "I make lots of mistakes. And my hand doesn't obey me." Ji Hoon raised his right hand, his fingers crooked. "I write like a chicken." "Then dictate," Yeon A said. "I'll write it down. Or draw. Or tell it orally. The form doesn't matter. The content does." Taeyin grinned widely. "I want to write about dragons." "Perfect," Yeon A smiled back. "Start." The first session lasted an hour. They talked about what a story is, where ideas come from. Yeon A read excerpts from Korean classics and modern authors. Asked, "What do you feel? What do you think?" Gradually, the children began to open up. Min Jae loved sci-fi and dreamed of writing a space saga. So Yeon wrote poems, awkward but honest. Yeon A made up stories for her little sister. Ji Hoon wanted to describe the day he had a stroke so people could understand. Taeyin invented stories about dragons who helped people. For next week, Yeon A said at the end, "Write or tell one story. Any story. About anything. About yourself or a fictional character. Don't be afraid." They left animated, talking among themselves. Yeon A stayed in the classroom alone, leaning against the desk. Something inside her stirred. These children reminded her of Ji Hoon. Just as rejected by the world. Just as strong, no one had given them a chance to show it. The next week, all 5 came with stories. Min Jae dictated a story about a spaceship crew of people with different abilities, and that was what saved them in a critical situation. So Yeon read a poem about silence that can be beautiful. Ji Hoon, with difficulty, wrote 3 pages with his left hand about learning to hold a spoon again. Yeon A listened, tears welling in her eyes. But she did not cry. She praised, asked questions, helped improve the texts. "You are talented," she said. "Truly talented." By the end of October, 3 more children had joined the club. Word spread through the town, there is a teacher who doesn't pity, but inspires. At home, every morning and every evening, Yeon A continued working with Ji Hoon. In November, the boy turned 3. He still couldn't walk, but he could stand while holding onto support for several minutes. "Good job," Yeon A whispered, hugging him. "You're so strong, my boy." She was saving money for orthoses. Everyone was set aside, denying herself everything. She ate rice and kimchi, wore old clothes. By the end of the year, she had saved half of the needed amount. In December, Principal Ho came to her again. "Yeon A, the parents of your club children are thrilled. They say their kids have changed. They've become more confident, happier. One boy, Min Jae, used to never leave the house except for school. Now he wants to study philology at university." The principal paused. "You're doing important work. Very important." "I'm just giving them a chance," Yeon A said quietly. "They do the rest themselves. Maybe you could write about it? About your method?" Ho suggested. It could help other teachers. Yeon A thought for a moment. A method. She did have a clear approach. Not to pity. Not to simplify. Not to condescend. To treat children with special needs as equals. To see in them not a diagnosis, but a person. To give them space for creativity, for self-expression. To teach them not to hide their pain, but to transform it into words, into art. I'll try, she nodded. In the spring, when Ji Hoon was 3.5, Yeon A finally bought the orthoses. She brought them home and unboxed them with trembling hands. The boy watched the strange devices with curiosity. This will help you walk, Yeon A explained, fitting the plastic and metal braces onto her son's thin legs. The first attempts were painful. Ji Hoon stood, holding the wall, his face twisted with effort. His legs trembled, but they held. He took one step. Then a second. On the third, he fell. Again, Yeon A lifted him. Let's try again. Every day, 10, 20, 30 steps. By summer, Ji Hoon could walk across the room holding onto furniture. By September, independently, slowly, swaying, but alone. Mom, look! He shouted, beaming. I'm walking. Yeon A cried as she watched him. Her boy. Her incredible, strong boy. At school, the literature club grew to 15 students. The children wrote stories, poems, plays. Yeon A organized an evening event where they read their works to parents and other students. The hall was full. Parents cried as they listened to their children speak of their pain, their dreams, their strength. After the evening, a woman approached Yeon A, Min Jae's mother. Thank you, she squeezed the teacher's hand. You brought my son back. He's alive again. Yeon A wrote an article about her method and sent it to an educational journal. A month later, it was published. 2 months later, she received a call from the provincial education department. Miss Kim, we read your article. Very interesting approach. Would you like to hold a seminar for teachers at specialized schools? Yeon A agreed. The seminar was held at the end of autumn. 25 teachers from different cities attended. She spoke about working with children with special needs, how not to turn them into objects of pity, how to reveal their potential through creativity. They don't want condescension, she said. They want to be heard. To be seen as people, not diagnoses. The teachers listened, took notes, asked questions. After the seminar, several approached to thank her. You inspired me, said a young teacher. I'll try to create a similar club at my school. Yeon A smiled. Something was beginning to change. Slowly, but it was changing. Ji Hoon turned 4. He started attending a regular kindergarten, not specialized. Yeon A spoke at length with the teacher, explaining the boy's needs. The teacher turned out to be understanding. We'll accept him, she said. And treat him the same as all other children. The first weeks were difficult. Other children watched Ji Hoon with curiosity, some teased him. But the boy didn't give up. He smiled, played, socialized. Gradually, he made friends. Mom, Subin said my braces are cool, he said one evening. Like a robot. Yeon A hugged her son, kissed his hair. He was so brave. Much braver than she was herself. 2 more years passed. Ji Hoon was 6, preparing to go to school. He walked confidently, though more slowly than other children. Doctors said his progress was almost a miracle. Yeon A knew it wasn't a miracle. It was hard work. Daily, persistent work from both of them. In the spring, she received a call from Seoul. A representative of a private specialized school for children with special educational needs. Miss Kim, we've been following your work. Read your articles, spoken with teachers who attended your seminars. We want to offer you the position of deputy principal, with the prospect of leading the school in a year. Yeon A was silent, processing the information. But I don't live in Seoul. I have a son. We'll provide housing and a place at the school for your son. We have inclusive classes. Please think about it. Yeon A thought for a week. Return to Seoul? The city that had caused so much pain? But it was a chance. A chance to do what she loved on a larger scale. A chance to help not 15 children, but hundreds. She spoke with her mother. Go, her mother said, stroking her hand. It's your destiny to help such children. And Ji Hoon will have better opportunities there. But you, I'll manage. I'll come visit. And you can visit me. Yeon A accepted the offer. They moved to Seoul at the end of August. The school provided a small apartment, 2 rooms on the outskirts of the city. For Yeon A and Ji Hoon, it was luxury. The boy ran joyfully through the empty rooms, his footsteps echoing off the walls. Mom, it echoes here, he shouted, laughing. Yeon A stood by the window, looking at the familiar, yet distant streets of Seoul. 6 years had passed since the day she left this place with 2 bags and a crying baby in her arms. 6 years. She wondered where Sun Woo was now. Was he still living with his mother in that 5th-floor apartment? Yeon A hadn't tried to find out. Their divorce had been finalized in absentia 3 years ago. Sun Woo didn't object, didn't even show up at the hearing. He hadn't paid child support once. As if he had never had a son. The school where Yeon A began working was a modern building with ramps, specialized classrooms, and equipment for children with various disabilities. 150 children, aged 7 to 18, studied there. Blind and visually impaired, deaf and hard of hearing, children with musculoskeletal issues and cognitive differences. The principal, Mr. Yu, a man of about 60 with a kind face, welcomed her on her first day. Welcome, Ms. Kim. I've heard a lot about you. I hope you'll settle in well with us. I'll do my best, Yeon A replied. The first few months were not easy. She learned to understand the school system, got to know the teachers, studied approaches to teaching. At the same time, she taught literature to senior classes and organized a literature club, just like she had done in the small school years ago. The children here were different, more closed off, more wounded by life. Many grew up in families that saw them as a burden. Some lived in boarding schools. In their eyes was frozen pain, distrust of adults. But Yeon A knew what to do. She didn't push or force. She simply created a space where they could speak. Write. Be themselves. Gradually, they began to open up. 17-year-old Yeon, a blind girl with phenomenal hearing, wrote a story about how she perceives the world through sound. 14-year-old San Hee, in a wheelchair, created a sci-fi saga about a world where everyone moves on wheels, and that was normal. 16-year-old Kyung Soo, with autism, drew a series of illustrations to accompany his short but poignant texts about how terrifying life can be when the world is too loud. You give them a voice, Principal Yu once said, watching a club session. That is priceless. Ji Hoon started first grade at the same school. Yeon A was anxious, but the boy managed. The teacher was experienced and understanding. His classmates accepted Ji Hoon. Here, everyone was special, which made it fair. But there was one difference. One day in November, Ji Hoon came home and said, Mom, I want to play a musical instrument. Like Min Soo in 3rd grade. He plays the piano. Which instrument do you want to play? Yeon A asked. The boy thought for a moment. A big one, that you hold like this. He showed how to hug a cello. A cello? Yes. I saw it in a video. It sounds so beautiful. Yeon A looked up prices for cellos and lessons. It was expensive. Very expensive. But she saw the fire in her son's eyes. the same fire with which he had learned to walk. "All right," she said. "Let's try." She found a music teacher who agreed to teach Ji Hoon for a reasonable fee. They rented a cello. The first lessons showed that the boy had talent. Absolute pitch, a sense of rhythm, and the ability to immerse completely in music. "Your son is extraordinary," the teacher said. "He has a true gift." Ji Hoon practiced every day. His fingers, once so weak, grew stronger, holding the bow, producing sound. Music filled their small apartment, making it a home. A year passed. Principal Yu retired, and Yeon A was offered the position of school director. She was 32 and was becoming the head of one of Seoul's top specialized schools. "I want to change our approach," she said at the first staff meeting. "We should not prepare our children for isolation. We must prepare them for life. Real life, where they are equals. We will develop inclusive education, collaborate with regular schools, create creative programs." Not all teachers supported her ideas. Some thought she was too young, too idealistic. But Yeon A did not give up. She implemented new methods, organized joint projects with regular schools, and invited people with disabilities who had succeeded to speak to the children. "You can do anything," she told her students. "Maybe not like everyone else. Maybe it will be harder for you. But you can." The school began to change. Children became more confident, more active. Parents saw progress and expressed gratitude. And in the evenings, Yeon A listened to Ji Hoon play the cello, thinking about how far they had come. How much they had overcome. 8 years after Yeon A had been thrown out of her mother-in-law's house, she sat at her computer in her director's office, writing a book. The first chapter, the second, the third. The book was titled "Don't Pity Them. Listen to Them." It was a collection of methods, stories, and reflections on working with children with special educational needs. How not to turn them into objects of charity, but to give them tools for self-realization. Yeon A wrote about her experience. About the literature club that began with 5 children in a small town. About how creativity heals, how words give strength. About how disability is not a verdict, but simply a different way of existing in the world. She wrote about Min Jae, who entered university to study philology and now works as a journalist. About So Yeon, whose poems were published in a literary magazine. About Yeon, who became a sound engineer. About dozens of other children who found their paths. And she wrote about Ji Hoon. About her son, who at 8 years old played the cello so beautifully that adults cried listening. About how he proved every day that a diagnosis does not define one's destiny. The book was published in the spring by a small provincial publisher. Yeon A expected nothing special, she just wanted her experience to be recorded and accessible to other educators. But the book unexpectedly took off. Teachers bought it, read it, recommended it to colleagues. Within 6 months, a second edition was needed. Yeon A was invited to conferences and seminars across the country. "Your book changed the way I work," teachers said. "Thank you." At one conference, a woman from the education department approached her. "Miss Kim, we want to implement your method in all specialized schools in the region. Could you lead a teacher training program?" Yeon A agreed. She traveled from city to city, conducting workshops, sharing her experience. Her school became exemplary, educators from other regions came to learn from their practices. And Ji Hoon grew. At 9, he gave his first solo concert at school. The hall was full, parents, teachers, students. The boy walked on stage carrying his cello, limping slightly. He still wore orthoses, though he could manage short distances without them. He sat, embraced the instrument, raised the bow, and played. Bach. Prelude. The sounds filled the hall, pure, deep, touching the very heart. Ji Hoon played with his eyes closed, dissolving into the music. His body swayed to the rhythm, fingers dancing across the strings. Yeon A sat in the front row, tears streaming down her cheeks. There he was, her boy. The same one her mother-in-law had called a cripple. The one his own father had abandoned. He played, and the world held its breath, listening. When the last chord faded into silence, the hall erupted in applause. People stood. Ji Hoon opened his eyes, smiled shyly, and bowed. After the concert, Mr. Lee, the owner of a private music school, approached Yeon A. Your son is incredibly talented. I want to offer him a scholarship at our school. Full tuition, free. We train professional musicians. Yeon A could not speak. She only nodded, holding Ji Hoon's hand tightly. 2 more years passed. Ji Hoon was 11, studying at a music school, regularly performing at concerts. Doctors said his condition had stabilized, his leg muscles strengthened thanks to exercises and music. He wore orthoses less and less. At 34, Yeon A had become a recognized expert in inclusive education. Her second book, Creativity as Therapy, became a bestseller among educators. The school she headed received a national award as the best educational institution for children with special needs. In October, she received a call from the city hall. Miss Kim, you have been chosen as the Teacher of the Year in our city. The award ceremony will take place in 2 weeks. Your portrait will be displayed on the city's honor board, the official said. Yeon A stood with the phone in her hand, unable to believe what she was hearing. Teacher of the Year? Me? Yes, there was a smile in the official's voice. Your contribution to education, your work with special needs children, your books, all of this makes you deserving of this award. The ceremony took place in a concert hall. The hall was full, officials, teachers, journalists. Yeon A sat in the front row, feeling out of place. She had always avoided publicity, preferring to work quietly. The city mayor gave a speech about the importance of education and those who dedicate their lives to children. Then he called Yeon A to the stage. Miss Kim Yeon A, his voice boomed through the microphone, you have shown that a true teacher does more than teach. You change lives. You have given hundreds of children with disabilities belief in themselves, tools for self-realization, and a future. Thank you. He handed her a crystal statuette and a diploma. The audience applauded. Yeon A approached the microphone. Thank you, her voice trembled. But this award does not belong to me. It belongs to my students. To those children who fight every day in a world that does not accept them. Who never give up, no matter what. They teach me far more than I teach them. Thank you to them. The next day, her portrait appeared on the city's main honor board, a large square in the center of Seoul. A photo in a business suit, with a faint smile. Under it was written, Kim Yeon A, Teacher of the Year, for contributions to the development of inclusive education. Yeon A stood in front of the board, looking at her image. 10 years ago, she had been sitting on a stair landing, thrown out of her home, holding a crying child. And now, Mom, look. You're on the board. Ji Hoon tugged her hand, excited. You're famous. Not famous, Yeon A smiled. I'm just doing my job. No, you're a hero, the boy said seriously. Like a superhero. Yeon A hugged her son. There he was, her real achievement. Not awards, not a portrait on the board. This 11-year-old boy, walking, playing the cello, laughing, living fully. The concert was to be held in the Philharmonic Hall. Ji Hoon, now 12, was invited to perform at a charity evening dedicated to children with disabilities. The program was called Music Without Borders. Yeon A helped her son prepare. The boy was nervous, it was his first concert in a real big hall, in front of 1,000 spectators. You'll do fine, she said. Just play as you always do. Feel the music. The night of the concert. The Philharmonic Hall glittered with lights. People entered and took their seats. Yeon A sat in the third row, reserved for performers' families. Next to her was an empty chair. She hadn't brought anyone, her mother couldn't come due to work, and she had no other close relatives. Or almost none. For the past 6 months, she had been seeing Mr. Choi Jin-ho, a math teacher from her school. A widower who had lost his wife 5 years ago. He had a 10-year-old daughter, so he, a quiet girl with a speech impairment. They had started communicating at work, then went for coffee after lessons. Jin-ho was calm, kind, understanding Yeon A without words, sharing her views on education. Over time, their relationship deepened. "I'll come to Ji Hoon's concert," Jin-ho had promised yesterday. "I'll support you." But he wasn't there. Probably delayed with Sohee. The concert began. Children performed, blind pianists, deaf dancers, singers with developmental differences. Every performance was stunning, proving that art knows no limits. Finally, Ji Hoon was announced. The boy walked onto the stage, carrying his cello. Without orthoses, he had managed without them for the past 6 months. A slight limp was barely noticeable. He sat, smiled at the audience, and began to play. Saint-Saëns. The Swan. The melody, tender and poignant, filled the hall. Ji Hoon played, pouring his soul into every note. His face was focused, his hands moved smoothly, drawing incredible sounds from the instrument. Yeon A listened, a lump rising in her throat. How he had grown. How he had changed. From a helpless infant to a talented musician. The last chord lingered. Silence. Then the hall erupted in applause. People stood. Someone shouted, "Bravo!" Ji Hoon bowed, smiled again, and walked off the stage. Yeon A wiped her tears when she felt someone's gaze. She turned around. In the 10th row, by the aisle, sat a man. Thin, balding, in a cheap gray suit. He looked at the stage, then at Yeon A. Their eyes met. Sun-woo. Yeon A froze. 10 years. They hadn't seen each other for 10 years. He had aged, his face hollowed, deep wrinkles appeared, shoulders slumped. He looked 50, though he was only 37. Sun-woo slowly stood and walked toward the exit. Yeon A, without understanding why, followed him. The Philharmonic foyer was empty, everyone was watching the concert. Sun-woo stood by the window, looking at the Night Soul. "That was our son," he said quietly, not turning around. "Ji Hoon." "Yes," Yeon A replied briefly. He's amazing. I didn't know he played like that." "How would you know?" There was no anger in her voice. Only stating the fact. "You haven't cared about him for 10 years. Sun-woo turned. His face was weary. "I know. He hesitated. "I was a coward. Weak. I let my mother throw you out. Let her call our son." He couldn't finish. "Why did you come here?" Yeon A asked. "I saw the poster. Read Kim Ji Hoon's name. Thought. It couldn't be. But I still came. And I saw you in the audience." Sun-woo lowered his head. "Yeon A, I want to apologize. I was awful. I betrayed you. Betrayed our son. I don't deserve forgiveness, but forgive me." Yeon A looked at the man who had once been her husband. Her child's father. She expected to feel anger, resentment, pain. But she felt nothing. Only slight pity. "How's your mother?" she asked. "She died a year ago. Cancer." Sun-woo ran a hand over his face. "I cared for her the last 3 years. In the end, she spoke a lot about you. About you and Ji Hoon. She regretted it. Asked me to find you, to ask forgiveness. But I couldn't. I was ashamed. And you? How's your life? Same apartment. Working as a manager in a small company. Salary is small. Life. He gave a bitter smile. Life passed me by. And you? He looked at her. I saw your portrait on the honor board. Read about you. Teacher of the Year. School director. Author. You achieved everything yourself. Not by myself, Yeon A corrected. With Ji Hoon. We did it together. Will he forgive me? Sun Woo's voice held hope. Yeon A was silent. I don't know. He doesn't even remember you. He was 2. I understand. Sun Woo nodded. I'm not asking for a meeting. Just, if you ever tell him about me, tell him his father was a fool. But he's proud of him. Very proud. Yeon A turned to leave. Yeon A, Sun Woo called. Are you happy? She turned around. Yes, she said simply. I am happy. And she returned to the hall, where other talented children were performing, showing the world that they could achieve anything. A week after the concert, Ji Hoon invited Yeon A and Ji Hoon to dinner. They went to his apartment, small but cozy. So he was setting the table, carefully arranging the plates. Hi, Ji Hoon, she smiled at the boy. So he spoke with difficulty, stretching out her words, but after sessions with a speech therapist, her speech had improved significantly. Hi, so he. Ji Hoon waved at her. They had been friends for several months, ever since Yeon A and Ji Hoon had started seeing each other. The dinner was warm, full of conversation and laughter. Ji Hoon talked about the concert, so he about her successes at school. Yeon A and Ji Hoon exchanged glances, smiling. After dinner, when the children went to Sohee's room to play, Ji Hoon took Yeon A's hand. I need to tell you something. Yeon A looked at him. Ji Hoon was serious. Yeon A, these past 6 months have been the best in my life since my wife passed away. You brought back my will to live. So he loves you. And Ji Hoon. He is like a son to me. He took out a small box. I want us to become one family. Will you marry me? Inside the box was a simple ring with a small stone. Yeon A looked at him, her heart filling with warmth. Ji Hoon, She paused. I need to talk to Ji Hoon. This decision concerns him too. Of course, Ji Hoon nodded. I understand. That night, at home, Yeon A sat beside her son on the bed. Ji Hoon, I need to ask you something important. The boy put aside his book and looked at his mother attentively. What is it, Mom? Mr. Choi. Ji Hoon. He proposed to me. Yeon A took her son's hand. But I won't answer until I know what you think. You understand what this means, right? We'll become one family. You'll have sort of a father and a sister. Ji Hoon was silent, thinking. Then he asked, do you love him? Yes, Yeon A answered honestly. Not like long ago. Different. Calmer. But real love. He's a good person, said Ji Hoon. And so he is great. The boy smiled. I like the idea of having a sister. And Mom, you deserve to be happy. You've done so much for me. It's time to do something for yourself. Yeon A hugged her son, pressing him to her chest. When did you become so grown up? I've always been grown up, Ji Hoon laughed. Just small in size. The next day, Yeon A called Ji Hoon. Yes, she said. My answer is yes. They had a modest wedding in March. Only close friends, colleagues, and a few students. Yeon A's mother came from the province, crying with happiness. Ji Hoon and So Hee were witnesses, two children standing beside them, smiling. "Now we're a family," Ji Hoon said, hugging the three of them after the ceremony. A real family. They moved into a new 3-room apartment, with enough space for everyone. Ji Hoon and So Hee each had their own rooms. Family dinners, walks together, home concerts whenever Ji Hoon played the cello. Life became full, rich, and happy. Yeon A woke up in the mornings, unable to believe it. Is this really true? This is her life? Ji Hoon was a caring husband and loving stepfather. He helped Ji Hoon with math, took So Hee to speech therapy, supported Yeon A in her work. They were a team. And Ji Hoon continued to grow as a musician. At 13, he won first place in the city's youth music competition. At 14, in the regional competition. He was invited to play at various events and concerts. "Mom, I've been invited to a national competition," he said one spring, at 15. "In the Seoul Concert Hall. It's very prestigious. Will you go?" Yeon A asked. "Of course." The boy's eyes shone. "I want to show what I'm capable of." The National Youth Music Competition took place in May. Ji Hoon, 15 years old, was a tall teenager with a serious face and confident movements. His limp was barely noticeable. He walked freely. Only the scar on his leg reminded him of what he had been through. The Seoul Concert Hall was huge, 2,000 seats. The contestants were the best of the best from across the country. The jury consisted of famous musicians and conservatory professors. Yeon A sat in the audience with Ji Hoon, So Hee, and her mother. Anxiety tightened her chest. Ji Hoon was performing last, number 15. They listened to the other contestants. All were talented, technically flawless. Violinists, pianists, cellists. Each played incredibly difficult pieces. Finally, the announcement came, number 15. Kim Ji Hoon. Cello. Elgar, Cello Concerto in E minor, first movement. Ji Hoon walked onto the stage. Yeon A squeezed her husband's hand. The boy walked confidently, carrying his instrument. He sat down, adjusted the strings, nodded to the accompanist. And he began to play. The first chords of Elgar filled the hall, solemn, powerful, full of sorrow and hope. Ji Hoon played, giving his all to the music. His fingers flew over the strings, the bow producing melody after melody. He didn't just play the notes, he told a story. A story of pain and overcoming. A story of falls and triumphs. His story. The audience held their breath. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Elgar's music, performed by this young musician, sounded uniquely, piercing, honest, without pretense. Yeon A watched her son and saw everything. She saw the 2-year-old who couldn't stand. She saw the 3-year-old taking his first steps in orthoses. She saw the 6-year-old who first held a bow. She saw all those years of work, pain, and perseverance. The last chord faded into silence. Ji Hoon lowered his bow and opened his eyes. The audience erupted. People jumped to their feet, applauding. They shouted bravo. Some whistled. These were not just applause, it was recognition. Ji Hoon bowed, smiling bashfully, then found his mother's gaze in the crowd. Yeon A waved at him, tears streaming down her cheeks, but smiling. The jury deliberated briefly. When all contestants returned to the stage, the head of the jury, a gray-haired conservatory professor, said, "The choice was not easy. All participants demonstrated the highest level. But one performance touched us particularly deeply. It was not just technique. It was soul." He paused. First place in the Grand Prix of the competition goes to Kim Ji Hoon. The audience erupted again. Ji Hoon stood in disbelief. Then he slowly walked to the head of the jury to receive his award. The professor handed him a crystal trophy and a diploma, then leaned down and whispered something. Ji Hoon nodded, and his face lit up. After the ceremony, as they walked out of the hall, Yeon A asked, "What did the professor say to you?" "He said I play like someone who has been through a lot," Ji Hoon replied. "And that the conservatory will welcome me if I want to go." "And do you want to?" "Of course, Mom." The boy hugged her. "Music is mine. Like your school is yours." Yeon A pressed her son to her chest. Ji Hoon hugged them both. So he jumped around them with joy. Yeon A's mother wiped tears with a handkerchief. "Let's take a photo," suggested Ji Hoon, taking out his phone. They posed together, 5 of them. A family. Ji Hoon held the trophy, smiling from ear to ear. Yeon A embraced her son and husband. So he snuggled close. Her mother stood to the side, proud and happy. At that moment, Yeon A noticed a familiar figure in the distance. Sun Woo. He was standing by a column, watching them. Their eyes met. He nodded slowly and turned away, leaving. Yeon A watched him go. Farewell, past. Farewell, pain. Farewell, resentment. "Mom, what are you thinking about?" Ji Hoon asked. "About how amazing we are," she smiled. "We went through everything. And we won." "You won, Mom," Ji Hoon said seriously. "You're my hero. A real hero." "No," Yeon A patted his head. "We won together. You and I. A team." That evening they celebrated at home. Ji Hoon cooked dinner, so he baked a cake, uneven, lopsided, but delicious. Ji Hoon played the cello for the family. Yeon A's mother told stories from Yeon A's childhood. Yeon A sat there, taking in her family, and realized, this is happiness. Not in awards, not in portraits on honor boards, not in books. Here. In this room, with these people who love her and whom she loves. A year after the competition, Ji Hoon was accepted into the conservatory on a full scholarship. Yeon A wrote her 3rd book, A Path Without Limits, My Son's Story. The book became a bestseller, read not only by educators but by ordinary people. The story of a boy once called crippled who became a musician inspired thousands. Yeon A's school was invited into the National Inclusive Education Program as a model institution. Her methods began to be implemented nationwide. Delegations from other countries came to learn from her. But for Yeon A, the most important thing remained. Every evening, returning home, she saw her family. Ji Hoon cooking dinner. So he doing her homework. Ji Hoon playing the cello in his room. It was her quiet victory. Not loud, not flashy. Just life, filled with love, work, and meaning. Several more years passed. Ji Hoon was 22, finishing the conservatory and preparing for his first solo concert at the Philharmonic. Yeon A was 43 but looked younger. Happiness preserves beauty. One spring evening, she and Ji Hoon walked through Central Seoul. They passed the old honor board where her portrait had once been displayed. The portrait had long been replaced. Every year a new teacher of the year was chosen. But everyone involved in education knew the name Kim Yeon A. "Remember how nervous you were when your portrait went up?" Ji Hoon smiled. "I remember." Yeon A pressed against her husband. "I thought it was some mistake." "No mistake. You deserved it. And much more." They continued walking until Yeon A noticed a familiar street. The very street where she once lived. With Sun Woo and his mother. The apartment on the 5th floor. "Let's go there," she said unexpectedly. "Are you sure?" "Yes." They approached the building. Old, peeling, unchanged. She remembered walking down these steps, counting them. 132. "Are you okay?" Ji Hoon asked quietly. "Yes," Yeon A smiled. "Everything's fine." I just wanted to see. To remind myself where we came from. Let's go home, she said to Ji Hoon. The kids are waiting. They stepped onto the illuminated street. May was warm, the city was in bloom. Yeon A walked beside her husband, holding his hand, thinking of tomorrow. Of the school where her students awaited. Of Ji Hoon, preparing for his concert. Of So-hee, who recently spoke her first flawless sentence and cried from joy. Of her mother, coming for the weekend. Of the life she had built herself. Stone by stone, brick by brick. From pain, from tears, from perseverance. From love for her son. From belief in herself. This was her victory. Quiet, but real. Ji Hoon's concert took place a month later. The Philharmonic was filled to capacity. Musicians, critics, journalists, and ordinary people in love with music. Yeon A sat in the first row. Beside her were Ji Hoon, So-hee, and her mother. A little further, a few of her former students, Min Jae, now a well-known journalist, So Yeon, who had published a collection of poems while Yeon, working as a sound engineer on television. Ji Hoon walked onto the stage. 22 years old. Tall, handsome. No limp, years of training, massage, and music had done their work. Only those who knew his story could notice the faint trace of his old gait. He sat, embraced his cello, and lifted the bow. This piece I dedicate to my mother, he said into the microphone. The woman who taught me never to give up. The woman who showed that love is stronger than any obstacle. Mom, you are my hero. Yeon A covered her face with her hands, crying. Ji Hoon hugged her shoulders. Ji Hoon began to play. Bach, Suite No. 1. Music poured out, filling the hall with harmony, light, life. This was music of victory. Music of a journey from despair to happiness. The audience listened, enraptured. And when the last note dissolved into the air, they rose as one, applauding. The ovation lasted 5 minutes. 7. 10. Ji Hoon bowed, smiling through tears. Then he descended into the hall and approached his mother. Thank you, Mom, he whispered, hugging her. For everything. No, Yeon A patted his back. Thank you. You made my life meaningful. They stood in an embrace, while around them the hall buzzed, cheering, rejoicing. But for Yeon A, only this moment existed. Her son, her victory, her life. And somewhere in the city, in the old apartment on the 5th floor, Sun Woo listened to the radio. They were broadcasting a report from the concert of the young cellist Kim Ji Hoon, a rising star of Korean music. This musician's story is incredible, the reporter said. Born with a severe leg condition, he learned to walk thanks to his mother's perseverance. Kim Yeon A, a renowned educator and school director, raised her son alone. Today, Ji Hoon is one of the country's most promising musicians. And his mother is an example of strength and maternal love. Sun Woo turned off the radio. Sat in the dark, empty apartment. And he cried. He cried for what was lost. For who he could have been. For the family he had betrayed. But it was too late. Too late. Meanwhile, in the Philharmonic, Yeon A smiled, holding Ji Hoon and Ji Hoon's hands. Her family. Her life. Her quiet, beautiful victory. 5 more years passed. Ji Hoon became a recognized cellist, touring the world. So he graduated from university and became a speech therapist, helping children like herself. Ji Hoon and Yeon A continued to work at the school, changing children's lives. One evening, Yeon A sat on the balcony of their apartment, sipping tea. Ji Hoon read a book beside her. Somewhere in the room, music played, a recording of Ji Hoon's new concert. What are you thinking about? Her husband asked. That everything worked out, Yeon A smiled. Despite everything. Or maybe because of it. You're a strong woman, Ji Hoon held her hand. I'm proud of you. I'm just a mother, Yeon A shrugged. A mother who loved her child. Everything else, the result of that love. They sat in silence, savoring the calm. Ji Hoon's music filled the evening. The city shimmered with lights below. And Yeon A knew she had won. Not over her mother-in-law, not over her ex-husband, not over circumstances. She had conquered despair. Fear. Hopelessness. She had simply chosen to live. To love. To fight. And that was enough.